Rambler, 1971. A Tale of the Silo and of the Nightfloaters. 1. Peter was the first to get his hands on a car, so we used to go cruising around, smoking cigarettes, listening to the hits on AM radio, and engaging in ribald badinage, i.e. trash talk for you guys. We rejoiced in our newfound freedom, but after a while there was a certain sameness about our nightly perambulations. Kerr Street to Lakeshore Road, to Clarkson, to Lakeshore Road, to Bronte, to Lakeshore Road, to Lakeshore Road. We then discovered there were only so many times you could cruise the satellite restaurant, home of out-of-this-world food, or country-style donuts. Freedom was replaced by ennui. Ennui. That's a fancy French word for boredom. And so we looked for diversions. We visited beautiful downtown Burlington once. And then we discovered mooning, which was great fun until Ricky decided to flash an entire Kmart store on a busy shopping night, after which we decided to lie low for a time. We had also learned that it wasn't a stunt to pull during the winter months, unless you wanted to show the audience a blue moon. And that's why we started tailing people. The idea was simple. See a car, especially one with girls in it, and follow them without alerting them to the tail, which was not that easy to do, especially in a small town where there was less traffic. It certainly spiced things up, even if a lot of our trips ended up at McDonald's or at the mall. Early one spring evening, we were heading south on Kerr Street and trying to fight off our routine when I recognized a vehicle heading north, a black 51 Buick. "Did you see that thing?" I yelled from the back seat. "Yeah, that's an oldie," Peter said remotely. "Follow it," I demanded. "What for?" "Just do it." Traffic was lighter than usual, so Peter was able to pull the Yui without consequence, and I was able to bring everyone up to speed about seeing the Buick at the old silo and the creepy guy who was with it. We caught up to the Buick at the lights. "He's hanging a left on Spears," Peter said. "You think he's heading out there?" "Could be." The Buick proceeded west on Spears, with us right behind it. It felt pretty obvious, but there was nowhere to hide. We could only hope the driver was so intent on his destination he didn't notice us. "I don't like this," I said. "If he turns right at the fourth line, pull into the gas station." So, of course, he turned right. 2. We sat in the gas station parking lot, feeling like total idiots. "What do you want me to do now?" Peter snapped. "We can't just sit here, you know. They're going to tell us to get lost." "I'll go buy a deck of smokes," Wimp said, getting out of the back seat and going into the station. While we were waiting for him, I said, "I've got an idea." "Huh, I was afraid you might. When Wimpy gets back, drive on and pull into the parking lot at Jelinek. There's nobody around, so we can park the car there." "And then what?" "We walk." "Shit." The Buick could only have driven over to the silo. After a brief discussion, we decided to cut through the woods rather than approach by the train tracks, where we'd be much more visible and in danger of any passing trains. It was still cool in the woods with a few clumps of snow on the ground, so I was glad of my windbreaker. "What's that?" Peter said, reaching out and grabbing my arm so suddenly I had to force myself not to yell. We stood like statues, listening. We could hear a whistling sound, which faded out the longer we hearkened to it. It's just the wind," I said quietly, although I wondered if it might be something else. An ominous sound I'd heard on other occasions. We stopped at the edge of the trees, where we were under cover of darkness. We could clearly see the silo and the remains of the concrete foundation. We could also see the base was surrounded by a trio of black vehicles, a big pickup truck, the 51 Buick, and an even larger and longer oldie. "What the hell is that?" whispered Peter. "That's not a frickin' hearse, is it?" "That's exactly what it is." "Caddy?" Wimp asked. "I think not." We didn't see any people around, nor could we hear any voices or any other sounds. After waiting 2 or 3 minutes in tense expectation, I motioned the others to step forward, while also gesturing for them to try and be quiet. We had almost reached the parking area when I caught a whiff of smoke. Cigarette smoke. Whirling around, I saw that Wimpy had a lit fag hanging from his hanging overbite. "Put it out," I hissed. "Why, there's nobody here," he answered, in a fairly normal, loud tone of voice. I didn't argue. I just knocked it out of his mouth and turned around before he could start a fight. We gathered around the vehicles, which appeared empty. The hearse turned out to be a Packard, and even older than the Buick. The truck was a giant Ford F-350, an enormous brute on humongous wheels. A large tarpaulin was stretched over the flatbed at the back, and when we walked around, we saw several pairs of feet, bare feet, sticking out from under it. We stood there stunned for half a minute. Then Peter whispered, "You think they're dead?" "I don't know," I said, "but I think we better get out of here. Now." But even as I said it, Wimp was reaching for the tarp. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I sputtered. "I want to see," Wimp said defensively. "2 of them's broads. We gotta get out of here now." Peter had wandered off and was peering into the back of the hearse. "There's some more in here. You think any more of them are hiding in the foundation?" "All right, you guys," I said. "I'm leaving before they come back." "You think somebody killed them?" Peter asked nervously. "They're floaters." Peter's eyes went wide. "Oh, shit." We took off back into the woods double time, but we hadn't quite made the safety of the trees when we heard the sound of something approaching. The "een" sound of the Nightfloaters. It was too late. Way too late. 3. Way too late. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a whitish sphere hurtling through the air like a snowball aimed straight for my face. Instinctively, I ducked and waited for impact. Nothing happened. I looked up and saw a pair of beady red eyes staring directly into mine. The eyes were attached to a bobbing head with a pale, consumptive face and flowing black hair. The head opened its mouth, revealing strong yellow teeth, and almost choking me with incredibly foul breath. It made a sudden movement forward, and I realized with a shock that whatever, was trying to bite me. I raised my hand palmed outward, which saved me from injury, as it had nothing to chomp when the jaw came down with a snap. Instinctively, I pushed the head away and heard it yell in pain. I realized I must have poked one of its red eyes, and I wouldn't have been sorry if I'd put it out. Not that I stopped to think, but ran, waving my arms madly for protection. Off to the side, I could hear yelling and swearing, but I was too terrified to even think about helping the other guys. I just wanted to make it to the road alive. As I ran, or tried to run, I kept colliding and caroming off tree trunks, but after an eternity, of perhaps 15 seconds, I saw the fourth line through a gap in the foliage and decided to take a quick, very quick look behind me. Just a little quick look behind me. Wrong move. The head was on me in a flash, diving straight at me. I didn't have time to raise my hands, but did manage to lower my head. And crack! I saw stars and would have fallen on my ass if I hadn't crashed into a tree trunk which held me up. As for the head, it lay upon the ground, the floater obviously knocked out. Seized by a sudden fit of anger, I booted it like a soccer ball, and it bashed into the side of a thick maple, and lay there. Jesus Christ, I thought to myself. I've killed it. I might have stood on the spot until I took root, but Wimp came blundering through the underbrush and barged into me, head down, hands waving in the air as if he was trying to swat something. He was. A female head. I found myself thinking, Wimp finally gets a chick interested in him, and he pushes her away. And I began to laugh uproariously, but I shut up when, "Run!" Wimp yelled, and he began slamming the palm of his hand into my shoulder, forcing me backwards until my brain caught up to the action, and I realized what he was doing, and I turned around and began to stagger, windmilling my arms towards the road, which seemed a little too far away. Wimp and I exploded out of the trees, our momentum almost landing us in the drainage ditch along 4th. Wimp jumped over the culvert, but I indulged in the luxury of looking over my shoulder. None of the heads were there, but neither was Peter, and he had the car keys. Where the hell, I started to ask, but I was cut off by Wimp's, "I don't know." "We've got to go back for him," I yelled, but Wimp was already charging back into the tree line. I followed. We found Peter on the ground, head up, ass in air, trying to cover the back of his neck from 2 female heads, ugly girls with lank, stringy hair. Wimp grabbed a large branch and, using it as a cudgel, swung it at them as they scooted just out of range. "Help me, asshole!" he roared. Darting forward, I grabbed Peter by the collar of his windbreaker and pulled. Fortunately, he was conscious and scrambled up and began running without any further encouragement from me. "Wimp!" I yelled, and, throwing away the cudgel, which I wasn't sure was a good idea, he came racing after us. On the other side of the road, we all turned at the same instant and looked back towards the trees. No floaters in sight. Are you all right?" I gasped, grasping Peter's arm to steady him. I think so. She bite you?" I don't think so, but the bitch tore my jacket." "Well, let's haul ass." And so we did. 4. We first realized Peter had been chewed when we were back in the Rambler and roaring along the QE. "Shit, I'm bleeding," he said. "Where did she get you?" I asked. "Side of the hand. It's starting to hurt like a bugger." Peter complained so much and was so obviously stricken, we urged him to get off the highway and back onto the urban streets, where we finally pulled in under a streetlight. "Christ, look at my hand," Peter gasped, while we all stared at it in consternation. Peter's right hand had swollen up and appeared to be turning a dusky shade of purplish black. "We've got to get you to a doctor's, quick," I said. "Emergency at the hospital is only a few blocks from here," Wimp added. I don't think I can drive." "We can hoof it," I said, trying to sound reassuring, but not really succeeding. We used our time on the way in attempting to come up with a plausible story to tell the old people, and finally settled on having Peter bitten by a dog. A large dog. He was practically delirious by the time we arrived, so I was the one who had to spin the yarn, first to a nurse and then to an intern. Wimp and I sat on the uncomfortable chairs in the waiting room for a long time, debating on whether or not to call Peter's old people. But we were too chicken, and unwilling to listen to any lectures or scolding. We argued about whether we should go outside for a smoke, and in the end, we agreed to take turns, although I suspected Wimp of firing up 2 butts while I was stuck inside. Eventually, an intern, a sour-faced young man with short hair and glasses, came out into the waiting room, walked up to us, and said, "What the hell happened to your buddy?" He got bit by a dog, eh?" Wimp said. "A dog with human teeth?" the intern shot right back, glaring at the both of us. We hadn't expected any questions, or at least not that particular question. I'm perfectly familiar with the injuries caused by the bite of a dog, the intern said. And those teeth were human, not canine. We figured silence was probably the best policy, but I didn't like the way the intern was looking at us, so I finally said, "Is it serious?" Just to say something. I can't tell whether we're dealing with tetanus or rabies. Rabies? So what or who bit him? You wouldn't believe us if we told you, I mumbled. Fortunately, Wimp was quicker than I was. It was a woman that done it, was all he said. We didn't go cruising for a while after that. Happy World Radio Day, everybody. February 13th, 2019, Regina, Sask.